So the skit is pretty obvious. It's your time has come, Age of Sigmar. That's the idea, right? That's what we're doing in today's episode. I've still got COVID, right? It's day 3 of having COVID, so I can't do a silly voice, but I wanted to. The thought was there, the effort was there. Yes, hello everyone. Welcome to the third video, 3 days back to back. That's not bad for a poorly man. Where we are talking about the old world, we're talking about Age of Sigmar and how the two can get along. Okay. Now, today's video, this subject has come from conversations I've been having with people in the comments section of the last 2 videos, because honestly, the engagement's been great. And I want to shout some people out. I want to shout out, and because it's not about us all getting along and holding hands and singing Kumbaya. This is about the conversation that now that Warhammer Fantasy has come back, we can actually have as equal seats at the table, right? Up until a point, we couldn't have this conversation because Warhammer Fantasy was dead and Age of Sigmar was alive. But now that both games are alive, we can communicate, we can actually talk. So shout out to Lakey War Games and his comments on the Best of Both Worlds video. Some fantastic points, and I do thoroughly recommend anyone that's watching this just go and read through these comments because they are good comments. I think that it's very valid that something Games Workshop could do moving forwards with dual use kits for Age of Sigmar and Warhammer Fantasy is just include base sizes for both games. Fundamentally, from what I know from talking with people who do play Age of Sigmar, base shape doesn't really seem to matter. Everything right now is circles and ovals and so on, but historically you could just play it with square base models. You don't have to rebase. Whereas with Warhammer Fantasy in the old world, yeah, they've got to rank up, which means they have to be square. Job done. It wouldn't really cost them much to do it. But there is an argument that they can, these kits, these factions can coexist. I would also want to give a shout out to G Stella 96. We don't see eye to eye on the subject, and that's okay. This video has come from this kind of conversation we've been having where it's, well, these factions were looked after by Age of Sigmar for the decade that you didn't exist as Warhammer Fantasy Battles. And that's a very valid point. However, I would say that it's not by choice. And now that we're back, it's not the players that we want to deprive of this stuff. It's ultimately the company. If you've not done anything with it in the game system, give it back. You don't need to keep hold of it. This is all conjecture anyway, because Games Workshop have already outlined what factions are in the old world and which ones aren't, and that's it. That's end of story. Until they change their minds, we are just speculating as to what could happen in like another 10 years time, right? But ultimately I would make strong arguments for these factions returning to the old world, especially if Age of Sigmar just hasn't done anything with them. But that said, the main subject for this video ultimately is the Thanos snap scenario, right? So let's say you wake up tomorrow and for whatever reason, whatever Games Workshop design reason, they've clicked their fingers and all of the Warhammer Fantasy models that exist in Age of Sigmar, if it was ever on a square base in Warhammer Fantasy 8th edition, End Times, or before that, it's now out of Age of Sigmar forever, right? You only have the things that you've made on the table. That's it. Everything else, right back in the old world where it belongs. So I've literally gone through every single faction from order through to destruction. I've counted all the different products, and I've not been counting things like books because books change, dice, endless spells, or terrain because they just don't count as miniatures, do they? You don't build your army out of fortifications. You build them out of soldiers and heroes and wizards and things like that, right? So total number of products for that faction, counting up how many are legacy products, and then just deducting that from the total. And what you are left with is what you are left with, right? So we'll go for each one. I'm not going to go alphabetically through every single one. I will just leave the numbers on the screen at one point so you can just read it for yourself. But needless to say, there are winners and there are losers. But we will go for the ones that are not affected at all, because all of their models are Age of Sigmar models and they are perfectly protected. And then we will go for the ones that have maybe one or two guys left, right? For perspective, there is a faction coming out of this that is left with two models, and they lose a grand total of 34 models, right? 34 products coming out of this. So let's start with the faction of Order, and the most unaffected. This requires no guess at all on your part. It goes without saying that the Stormcast Eternals, with their starting weight of what was it, 65 products. I know on the website it says 72. I'm not counting books or endless spells or scenery or any of the get started kits, because those in some cases, if not all cases, share models with the Auric War Clan, so then it gets confused. So none of those, just the actual models themselves. The bundles, like the start collecting ones, they're perfectly fine. So long as you've got at least one model that is unique to Age of Sigmar, that stays, that counts as a product. Because I know in some cases you get weird, like one-off models, like character models that are only available in the start collecting bundles. So yeah, I kept it as simple as I can for this. But it should be no surprise to anyone, the Stormcast Eternals that existed purely in Age of Sigmar are completely protected, right? 65 of 65 products remain. Fantastic. The same can also be applied to the Fire Slayers, Idoneth Deepkin, Caradron Overlords, and Lumineth Realm Lords, all of which are completely unique to Age of Sigmar. They lose nothing from this happening, right? They are all completely protected. It should be noted that those are the only factions across all of Age of Sigmar that lose nothing. It doesn't matter if it's death or chaos or destruction, all the other factions have at least one or two models sprinkled in from Warhammer Fantasy. But for whatever reason, Stormcast Eternals, Fyreslayers, Idoneth, Caradron, and Lumineth Realm Lords, they are all completely 100% unique to Age of Sigmar, and that is fantastic. Keep them. That is what this video is about, right? So Order is pretty strong in that aspect. Let's shine a light on the factions then that are suffering a bit. This should come as no surprise to anyone, but the cities of Sigmar are losing a lot. They're losing a lot of models with this change. I want to point out as well, since I made the video yesterday, I'm pretty sure things are being taken off the store as we speak. Some things are coming off as we do this. Things are being removed off the website, right? But if you go through, if you count them all up, the Cities of Sigmar, out of 44 total products that currently exist, because remember, Cities of Sigmar is Warhammer Fantasy, the Empire, High Elves, Dwarves, Wood Elves, Dark Elves, like they smushed everything into Cities of Sigmar. 31 products are what we can consider safely legacy products, right? 31. You go from 44 down to 13. That is almost the highest amount of any of the factions. Almost. And then second to Cities of Sigmar, it is the Seraphon. The Seraphon lose a lot of models again, and you've got 30 products across the range. 14 of them are legacy Lizard Men kits, and the other 16 are 100% new and unique to yourself. But that's nearly half that's going, right, in this scenario. It gets a bit rough when you look at Daughters of Cain and Sylvaneth, because they don't have many kits to start off with. Daughters of Cain especially, they've got 15 products, taking out the book and the endless spell and all that, right? They lose those 6 kits, they go down to 9. So they're a bit, ooh. Okay, let's head over to the Realms of Death. So, who are the winners and who are the losers in death? Well, the winners and losers are kind of one and the same. So, Soul Blight Gravelords, right? 39 products on the website. If you take the book away, it's 38. Strangely enough, no endless spells or terrain or anything like that. Well done. Well done, Games Workshop. You were able to control yourselves. 16 of the Soul Blight Gravelords kits are Legacy Warhammer Fantasy Vampire Count kits, right? 16. And 4 of those are the zombie dragon variants, right? But that does leave you with 22 unique Age of Sigmar kits for Soulblight Gravelords. That's really good. That is a really healthy amount. Far healthier than last place in Death, which, you know, is this really going to surprise anyone when I point out the fact that the Flesh Eater courts are almost wholly dependent on Warhammer Fantasy kits to stay alive. Flesh Eater courts, they've got 16 kits across the range. 12 of them come from Warhammer Fantasy, right? So that leaves you with four unique sets, if you like. That's not great. And as I pointed out yesterday, Night Haunts, they're sitting pretty. 23 products, well, 23 kits, only 4 of which are from Warhammer Fantasy. I miscounted yesterday. I missed out the Hexwraith Knights or whatever they're called. So it's 19 they go down to. Oziark Bone Reapers, I was convinced that Oziark Bone Reapers were all new Age of Sigmar kits. They're not. They're not. They're actually 16 kits. 2 of them are the old Morghasts from the End Times Nagash. So yeah, you go from 16 down to 14. That ain't bad. That's really, that's really quite good. If it weren't for that one kit that can be turned into 2 things, um, it would just be like Fire Slayers and all that. You would be a wholly unique Age of Sigmar thing. Honestly, Oziark Bone Reapers, just drop that one guy. You don't need it. Like, it's what difference does it make? All right then, so that's death out of the way. Let's jump straight into chaos. And who is the safest in chaos? Well, considering Blades of Corn were the original faction against the Stormcast Eternals, you'd think they'd be pretty safe. Yeah, turns out they're not. Turns out the most safest group is actually Slaves to Darkness, with a eye-watering 50 products across the line. Only 11 of them are legacy now, right? And even then, the majority of those are character units and some real old stuff like the Marauders. Like, I mean, as a Warhammer Fantasy fan, like even 10 years ago, back in 2014, 2013, yeah, the Marauders were old then, let alone now. So, yeah, I get it. But Slaves to Darkness, you lose 11 kits, you go down to 39, you're sitting pretty, right? The technical last place is Chaos Dwarves because you cannot buy Chaos Dwarves anywhere from Games Workshop now. Okay. Ever since they merged Forge World into Games Workshop, the actual Warhammer Forge Chaos Dwarves, the Dread Legions of Asgore, and all that, they no longer exist. You cannot buy Chaos Dwarves. So I don't know in Age of Sigmar how you are managing this because they don't list them as one of the factions on the main page. When you go through the drop-down menus of all the different factions, Chaos Dwarves are nowhere to be seen. So we're in a real weird place, aren't we, with them? Because there is zero support for Chaos Dwarves in Age of Sigmar. In Warhammer Fantasy, the old world, they're saying that they can't come back for lore reasons, but they're not sold anywhere for anything. What's going on, GW? Because you could do something with that, couldn't you? No. Actual last place for Chaos. Well, just before we get to that, so just to tie up the loose end with Blades of Corn, you'd think being the original launch faction alongside Stormcast Eternals, they'd have received a lot of support over the years. Blades of Corn have and haven't. It's really quite weird. You've had a lot of characters and you've had some like new units over the years, But out of the 32 unique units that you have, 16 of them, exactly half, are from Warhammer Fantasy, including stuff that I genuinely thought came out with Age of Sigmar. Because you look at the models and they look like Age of Sigmar models. So Scar Bloodwrath, no, he was released during the end times. Um, the Wrathmongers, they look like Age of Sigmar models. No, they came out during the end times. Same as the Skull Reapers. Like if you had like proto Age of Sigmar models, these are them. These are them without a shadow of a doubt, right? I'll hold my hand up. Disciples of Tzeentch, Hedonites of Slaanesh, Magakin of Nurgle. I had to Google a lot of the units just to see which ones were released during the end times and which ones were released during, Age of Sigmar's tenure in the last 10 years. But they're all pretty healthy. I mean, Hedonites of Slaanesh, it goes without saying, because out of the 28 products or 28 kits, only six of them, and even then, four are like the same chariot variant. So yeah, and that's mainly the demonettes, right? Second to last place for the faction of Chaos, you've got the Beasts of Chaos. I feel like this isn't a staggering surprise to anyone, because even if you were to say, oh, those Zangors and all that, that should actually be with the Tzeentch faction. I mean, honestly, you didn't have much to work with in the first place. Beasts of Chaos have 23 kits. They rely on 17 from Warhammer Fantasy. So if those 17 magically vanished overnight, you'd be left with six, right? You're in Flesh Eater Court's territory of not having enough to go around. But absolute last place, and honestly, as a Skaven player, I can only say it is fitting because the Skaven, my boys, as much as I love them, out of the 36 Skaven kits that currently exist, 33 of them came from Warhammer Fantasy. Over the last 10 years, you have created 3 unique Skaven kits. That's it. So if we woke up tomorrow and all the Warhammer Fantasy Skaven kits went away, you'd be left with 3, right? If that's not a heavy reliance on old product, I don't know what is. Okay. But yeah, absolute last place. There are no other factions. I mean, Cities of Sigmar come close, but you got to remember with Cities of Sigmar, they combine like 4 or 5 Warhammer factions together, right? It's absolutely insanity. So let's go into destruction. Who are the winners and the losers in destruction? So sitting pretty, it should, probably be of no surprise, especially with Age of Sigmar third edition. The Orruk war clans have the most that are unique to Age of Sigmar. Orruk war clans have 40 kits, 9 of which are legacy, and it's all the Savage Orc kits. It literally is just the Savage Orc kits. So you take the Savage Orcs out, you go down to 31, that's it, right? Orruk War Clans, you are doing great in Age of Sigmar at the moment. You are up there with the Slaves to Darkness, you are up there with the Stormcast, you're up there with the Lumineth Realm Lords and Soulblight Grave Lords, right? You overtake them with the amount of kits and variety that you have. Losing out the most, however, and if you've seen my last video, you shouldn't be surprised by this, it's the Ogre Mawtribes. Out of the 26 kits that you currently have, 21 of them come from Warhammer Fantasy. So you're left with 5, right? You are left with Kragnos, the Bloodpelt Hunter, Ogre Mawtribes Tyrant, the Vanguard Ogre Mawtribes because it contains the Tyrant, and Black Powder's Buccaneers. That's it. That's your force. If all the Warhammer Fantasy miniatures were to vanish overnight. And it's a massive reliance on kits that were designed a decade ago that you haven't, as a game system, really done anything with. So who comes out ahead then when it comes to destruction? Because Sons of Behemat, as we kind of covered last time, you've got 8 kits in the first place. You lose 2 with the Man Crusher Gargants or whatever. You go down to 6 kits, one of which is Karagnos. You're playing the Giants faction anyway. So what do you expect? Gloomspite Gits. This is where things get a little interesting. With Gloomspite Gits, you'd kind of expect there to be more that's new than there actually is, because there's 34 products currently in Gloomspite Gits, 34 kits. 11 of them are from Warhammer Fantasy. And for the most part, it's the Arachnarok Spider kit, right? The Arachnarok Spider comes up 4 times on the website. So out of the 11, 7, it goes down to say only 7 then are different things, right? But you go down from 34 kits down to 23. Again, you're sitting pretty, right? You're sitting great. So all this counting numbers and experiment, what does this actually tell us about Age of Sigmar? If nothing else, it can tell us where they're going to be investing their time in designing new products. Cities of Sigmar, Daughters of Cain, Flesh Eater Courts, we already know new models are coming out for. Beasts of Chaos, maybe. Skaven, maybe. Ogre Moor tribes, maybe. Sons of Behemoth, I don't really think they're going to do much else with, because it's just big giants, and they've released the big giants, and that's kind of it. They're fine now, for at least for an edition. But this is the thing, like, the majority of your factions aren't really affected. Okay, the unique factions that you have made, the Fire Slayers, the Ideneth Deepkin, the Lumineth Realm Lords, all that, they're unaffected at all. Okay, they have 0 impact, losing Warhammer Fantasy models. Some of them, like Oziark Bone Reapers, lose a kit at most. And then some of them, like Skaven and Ogre Moor tribes, and Beasts of Chaos, it's devastating. There's almost nothing left. I mean, you can count some of the models that are left on one hand. And what that tells me is those factions, as much as you might love them in Age of Sigmar, they're not really doing anything, and you probably don't need them there. Anyway, that's the experiment done. I just wanted to, it just occurred to me with everything that we're talking about. Why don't we hypothetically go, okay, what would happen if all those models cease to exist and it's just the Age of Sigmar models? Well, now you know, that's what it would look like. All right. Thank you all for watching, boys and girls, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye. Goodbye.